Welcome my friends. In this section we will study about HTTP. The full form of HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's a protocol that we very commonly use to access the World Wide Web. Other protocols such as FTP exist, which is the file transfer protocol. We will be focusing on the HTTP protocol. In this section we will be learning about the various aspects of HTTP, particularly the two constituents of HTTP, the request and the response. Also we will study about two types of requests, particularly the GET request and the POST request. So let's move forward. Let's start the lecture with a web server, what a web server is. A web server constantly is functioning on a computer and it's trying to get a request. It will accept a request from a client. So it processes the request and then sends a response back to the client. This response can be an HTML page, it can be a text, it can be PDF, it can be even an MP3 file. But we will be mostly concerned with HTML files. The example of web server can be an Apache web server. It's a very common server. IIS, Microsoft IIS server is again a very common server to process and send static files. Whereas for dynamic files we use Apache Tomcat, and that's what we will be using. Servlet is a dynamic way of handling Java. So we will be using Apache Tomcat as an example. So what is a web client then? A web client is essentially your browser. It can also be an Android phone's application, or it can be an iOS application on your Apple phone. But primarily we are concerned with web-based applications on browsers. Example is Firefox. So what does a web client actually do? It makes the request to the web server. So the web server was waiting for a request from the web client, and the web client actually makes the request to the web server. Okay, and it gets a response from the server, web server, in the form of HTML or whatever it is, and it renders that response, that HTML. The client, the browser understands what the HTML is supposed to mean, and it shows you visually, it shows you different elements of the HTML tag and it shows it. So that's what a web client does. What is HTTP as such? Essentially HTTP is a protocol where clients and servers use on the web to communicate. So a web client and a web server both are using HTTP protocol through request and response to communicate with each other. The server uses HTTP to send HTML to the client. Mostly we are sending HTML. It can be a text file also, but we send an HTML file, and the HTML tells the browser how to display the content to the user. The HTML is a structured language. It's a tag based language, hypertext markup language. It's the full form of HTML, and you might have some idea how it basically works, and a browser renders this HTML. So that is the essence of this lecture. In the next lecture we will go through HTTP response.